Fletcher, Chief Growth Officer at Cypress North. We're a digital agency in Buffalo, New York, and you're listening to the Agency Scoop. Each episode, I'll tackle a specific topic from an agency point of view. We're going to talk about what's helping us grow, challenges that we face, how we're working with our clients, and even things that bring us joy. Welcome to this month's episode of the Agency Scoop. Today I'm going to talk about a new business process that we put in place here at Cypress North. And I also have a Q&A with Casie Gillette of Co-Marketing. We're going to talk about building your own in-house marketing team versus hiring an agency and the pros and cons of both. But to get into what's going on here at Cypress North, as I said, we created a new process for new business prospects where we wanted to assign a priority to each and figure out a way to quantify whether they're a good fit for our agency or not. So we came up with a client scoring system where we look at a lot of different variables and weigh them differently to make sure that they're a good fit to come into the agency for 2022. So to go through some of these variables, the first thing that we look at is the actual contact that we'll be working with. We think about, is this person kind? Are they someone that would be good to talk to on a daily basis? Would we have a good relationship with them? I always say that it's important that not only do we do good work, but that our clients like working with us, and the same thing goes for the client contact. We want to make sure that we like who we're working with. Also, alongside that is whether the contact has authority to give approval on things. So are they able to execute and approve our plans? Are there a lot of levels of bureaucracy involved? What does that process look like? And how do we price things to make sure that we're taking that into account? Also, access and transparency. So are there issues getting access to information even as we're quoting a new project? Are they keeping things hidden that they say they'll give us access to once we have a contract in place? We like to look for people who are really open with their business and with their challenges so that we know if we can really help them or not. If they can't give us the information while we're pitching the business, it doesn't fare well for down the road when we're trying to get that information out of them working on the business. The next thing that we consider is the product. Is it a good product that we can help with sound marketing efforts? Is it something that people actually want? There's a lot of people out there that sell things that nobody wants, and so that's really hard for us to market. We can't outmarket a bad product. The next thing is interest and care. So does the client actually want to do well, and are they engaged? And that sounds like a no-brainer because usually clients should care about how their business is doing. But sometimes when you're working with a mid-level marketing manager, they just want to check things off their list and they don't care about how things are going or whether we're giving them great results. So we want to make sure that we're working with clients that really care about how we're performing for them. Price sensitivity, of course, is a variable that comes into play. This is always important, whether clients see things as how cheap can I get a service or how inexpensive, or if they really see the value in what we're doing and see that the return on their investment is going to be worth it. One of the other things is ability to improve. So whether or not we see the ability for us to make an impact on what they're doing. If they're currently doing really great and they have a lot of things in place and we don't see anything that we could recommend to do differently, that might be a really big challenge for us working with them as a client. So we want to make sure that there is actually that ability there to improve. Some of that relates to that good product and whether we can actually make an impact with the product or not. The last thing that we have on the list is really the long-term outlook. So do we think they're looking for a partner or just a quick fix short-term contract where we can help them out with things? And those aren't always a good or bad thing because sometimes one-off projects can be really great for the agency, or if we have a slow time or seasonal client that we need to fill things with. So that really depends on timing, how we might score that variable. So when we have a new business prospect, we look at all of these things and score them on a 1 to 10 scale. And then we assign weighting to different variables to come up with the final score. And what we decided on was if they have a passing score, so just like in school, 65 or higher, we would think about taking them on. So if their score is lower than 65, we've realized that they're probably not a great fit for our agency and we want to refer them to somebody that might be a better fit for them. We also came up with a list of things that we see as red flags or bonus points that we might add to them. So I'll go through that a little bit here. So we have these questions as bonus points where if they have more divisions within their business, that could lead to more business for us. So maybe they're coming to us with a pretty small project, but we see that opportunity within their company to earn their business doing other things for other product lines or other divisions. And the same with other opportunities to bring in our other teams. If they're coming to us for a marketing contract, but we see the opportunity where maybe in the future they could work with our design team or our development team, that would be extra points for us. Also, are they a referral from someone we trust, or have they been a past client and we really liked working with them? That's a really great way for us to know if the contact is going to be a good person to work with and what we can expect from them. So a few red flags that we notice when we're talking to clients, besides the things that we were scoring them on, were things like timeline. So is this something that's a rush job that they need done yesterday, that we won't be able to really go through our process, take the time and care that we normally do to come up with the right strategy and the right solution for them? Also, if they have a total budget that won't be profitable for us to serve them, or if they won't have access to additional budget in the future, that's also a red flag where we might not be able to be a good fit for them. And the last thing is if there's a potential issue with payment terms. So when a client comes in and it's the first time we're working with them and they say, hey, can we pay 120-day terms or something like that, then that's always a red flag that maybe they're not a stable business to work with. So these are all things that we've been considering as we're working with a lot of prospects right now and planning for 2022. But we also talked about how we could use this model to look at our current client relationships a few times a year and evaluate if things aren't going well and evaluate what we might need to do to either change their contract or go in a different direction. So we really are excited about this tool that we've been using, and I'd love to hear what you all are doing with your business prospects and how you figure out if it's a good thing to go after or not. Let me know on Twitter or LinkedIn at The Agency Scoop. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So now on to today's main event, our Q&A with Casie Gillette. She's the Senior Director of Digital Marketing at Co-Marketing, which is a B2B marketing agency in Boston, Massachusetts. Casie's been responsible for developing and implementing strategies for both small businesses and Fortune 500 companies alike. She regularly speaks about content marketing, search, social, branding, and all things marketing, so I'm thrilled to have her on the show today. I asked her to come on to talk about the pros and cons of hiring an agency versus building a marketing team in-house. She's actually had experience as an in-house marketer and on the agency side, so I thought she had some great perspectives, and we had a great time discussing this topic. So here is this month's Q&A with Casie Gillette. So welcome, Casie Gillette, who's a Senior Director of Digital at Co-Marketing. Thank you so much, Casie, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited. I'm a big Cypress North fan, so It's always fun to be with you guys.
Well, I love to hear it. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your role at Co-Marketing, a little bit about co-marketing in general would be great too.
Yeah. So I've actually been in the search marketing space since 2005. I got my first job out of school, had no idea what SEO was. Here we are, however many years later, doing, all of the different things. And it's certainly much different, but my role at Co-Marketing, I've actually been there 9 years. And prior to that, I was there 3 before I went in-house for a couple years. And so right now, it's still a mix of like client management and, team management, managing accounts, that kind of stuff. But a big part of my role now is also like personnel development, team training, building the team that we have, which is something that I really love and have gotten to do more over the past 5 years. But, you can't work at an agency and not do client work. Well, if you can, tell me how you're doing it, I guess.
You could do new business. That's what I do.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's even worse.
That's funny. Well, so, you worked in-house as part of a marketing team. So I guess, tell us a little bit about that experience going from agency to in-house, back to agency, back to the dark side.
Yeah, that's right. I wasn't looking for a new role at the time. And it was actually, I think it was like 2008 or 2009, right around the time that the market had started to crash. And so I was working at co-marketing at the time, much smaller company. There were only four of us. And I had been approached by a company to come, start their search marketing program. And I was like, no, no, no. And they just kept asking me, and I was like, you know what, this might be a good opportunity. And there really wasn't much for me to do at co-marketing. So it kind of ended up being the perfect situation. And in all honesty, I'm so glad I did it, because to get that view of the other side, I think really helped my career going forward when I came back to the agency. Is you have a much different perspective of, when you're talking to that client, you understand the bureaucracy and the things that happen on the outside that you might not have got to before. And I also just got exposure to things that I wouldn't have on the agency side. So I had gone in to lead the SEO program, but I ended up running the paid search program. We started a social media team. We were doing radio advertising and TV advertising. And those were things I just wouldn't have had experience with. So I think it was really valuable. But then I kind of got bored. You're there for a few years and it's the same site, and I was like, all right, take me back to the agency.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that. I like the variety, and,
Yeah.
Working at an agency, you get that variety of industries and different types
Yeah,
of companies.
absolutely.
Well, it's great that we have you here that has that experience, because the main topic today is really, should I hire an agency or build an in-house team? And when we talk to prospective clients, this is something we hear a lot, especially clients that haven't hired an agency before. Maybe they're on the smaller side, or maybe they have a new CMO who, worked with agencies before, but wants to build their own team. So there's just a lot of different scenarios where companies are asking themselves, should I build my own team or should I hire an agency? And obviously, like most things in marketing, the answer is always, it depends.
That's right. It's always the go-to answer.
Right. So what do you think, from being on both sides, what do you think some of the benefits of having an in-house team are?
Yeah. Well, I honestly think the biggest benefit is that knowledge, right? No one knows your business better than the people who are in it all the time. And I think that's something, even at co-marketing, it's something we really strive for, is understanding our client's business and understanding their audience. But that client might only be like a day out of your week. Whereas when you're in-house, that's all you know, right? And so you're really focused on understanding who are the people we're targeting, what are our goals, and you also have insights into what's happening across the company, right? So you have insights into what's happening on sales, what's happening in customer support. Like, those things are really valuable. And that's what I thought. When I was working in-house, I loved the fact that, and I know not all companies are like this, but I thought the company I worked for did a really great job, is marketing actually met with customer support and sales on a weekly basis to understand what were some of the customer pain points, what were the things that we were hearing, and to allow sales and customer support to know, well, what's happening on the marketing side, right? So you have that integration with your in-house team that your agency in most cases isn't privy to. And I think that's a huge deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. We did a scoop episode a few months back about aligning your sales and marketing teams, because a lot of companies don't do that. So your in-house team sounds like they were doing a great job.
Yeah, they were. I'll give them, they were doing a really great job on that.
Well, what do you think some of the downfalls are of an in-house team?
Yeah, I mean, it goes to knowledge, cost, right? Like, when people think about hiring an agency, there's a budget tied to it. And a lot of times, I mean, we have clients who specifically will say, like, we don't have the money to hire someone for this position. So, this is why we're going with an agency. So I think there's that. I mean, you also have just like the general knowledge, right? So like, someone in-house might not know all of the things that someone on an agency does. Right. So, there's benefits to both, there's downfalls to both. But I do think, that budget is a big thing, a big part of, like, you mentioned small companies before. Like, a lot of times small companies just don't have like these big budgets to hire someone where they can get an agency to do 3 different jobs instead of hiring 3 different people.
Right. And it's hard to find really great talent to come
Yeah.
in-house
Oh my goodness.
sometimes.
It really is.
Especially on the creative side, if you're at, a manufacturing company or something that's not as exciting,
Yeah.
where, someone that's super creative and wants to come up with huge ad ideas and things like
Yeah.
that they're not necessarily attracted to the in-house life of B2B
Absolutely.
manufacturer or something.
Absolutely. And, we work with a lot of B2B companies, so I completely understand that, right? Like there's only so many, like, and I always, and even just like, kind of off topic, but even hiring when we're hiring people for our team, I always say like, this isn't the glamorous, like Nikes and like Coca-Colas of the world. Just be clear.
Just so you know, do you like
Yeah.
lead generation?
That's right. I got a job for you.
Yeah, it's and hiring is such a huge struggle right now, I think everywhere. But when you're hiring for an in-house team, a lot of times if you're the marketing director or you're the CMO, and you're hiring someone that does paid search or you're hiring someone that does SEO, you may not know how to find that right person that really does have that talent, and you don't necessarily know how to train them either. So
Absolutely.
if they don't come in really knowing their stuff,
Yeah.
then where do they go from there?
Yeah,
How do
you're
you
right.
train them?
And I think that's such a great point because, I think about like at an agency, like a lot of times we're able to hire people right out of school and train them, right? Because we have the capacity to do that. But you're absolutely right. Like in-house, like you don't have time. You don't always have time to do that.
Yeah. Or just even the knowledge to do that.
Yeah.
If you're the person
Yeah.
that doesn't,
Yep.
no, you want to hire lots of different people to do different jobs. As you said, you might hire 3 people, or you can hire an agency to do 3 people's jobs.
That's right. Yeah. I have a client who she's a CMO and she's been with us for like 10 years at this point with different companies. And she will always say like, I know enough to be dangerous. She's like, but I hire people because I trust them to do the job that I can't.
Yeah.
So in finding those people is always one of her biggest challenges.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So what do you think some of the best benefits of hiring an agency are?
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned earlier about like that ability to do like 3 different jobs, right? Like we have clients where, we're doing their SEO, their writing, their content marketing, we're running their paid search, we're doing media buying for them. And that's easy because we have the team to do that. Whereas, we were just talking about, you don't always have the capacity to hire all those people. But I think what's important in that, and, being in this space, like things change so quickly. Right. And, I think about marketing a clock and all the updates every single week to the platforms. And, whether it's a small change or a big change, if you have someone in-house, they might not be they can't stay on top of that the same way someone who's in those platforms every single day can, and who's really paying attention to those changes. And I don't know that people always consider that, but it's kind of a big deal when these changes are now happening so frequently that you really have to stay on top of it. I mean, it's a challenge just for us to know, all right, like here's what Google did today, or here's what Bing did today, right? Like we have to know those things because we have this broad set of clients. But also like a lot of times they don't announce those changes. So unless you see it in your account, you might not be aware of it until it actually hits you.
Mm-hmm. You're actually seeking those things out.
Right.
Yeah. I would say that a lot of companies, when they're looking for agencies now, I've noticed recently that they're asking, how do you stay on top of that? How do you make sure that you know what's going on and knowing those trends? So people are thinking about it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And, it is funny. There's people who, and I don't know, like one thing I've noticed for sure is like the people that we're interacting with more on the sales processes are like higher level now. And that used to be, when that was the case previously, I didn't feel like they had as much knowledge about that kind of stuff, right? Or like they didn't have as much awareness about those changes, but I'm seeing it so much more as like even VP levels or CMO levels have a lot of a sense of, hey, we need to know like what's going on.
Yeah. Well, and it's not new anymore. 15, 20 years ago, it was new technology. Right. It was new thing that everybody was doing. And so
Yeah.
they hadn't been burned before. Maybe
That's
now
right.
they've learned.
That's right. Like, oh man, we got to pay attention to what's going on here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so what do you think some of the downfalls of hiring an agency could be?
Well, I mean, the same thing applies, right? Like you can have an agency who just isn't able to understand your business, right? Or just who isn't able to give you the time that you need. I have I have people who used to work for us who now work in-house. And I love hearing their stories about like the agencies that they've come into working with, or agencies they work with, who they just, because they were on the agency side, they have such a different view of it. But one of those is, some agencies are very, very strict on their rates, right? So you only get X amount of hours. And if you aren't prioritizing those hours and using them to your benefit, you're kind of out of luck, right? So there's certainly that. Whereas if you have someone in-house, like they're dedicated to you all the time. Aside from that, like sometimes it's just not the right fit. I mean, we actually have a client who we just parted ways with because it's not that performance wasn't there. It just wasn't a good fit for either of us. And part of their concern was, well, now we have to go through this whole process of finding another agency. So it is a big deal in hiring that person who's going to fit with your business. And I think that's tricky.
Yeah. Yeah. I think too, just like in-house, sometimes people come and go. And so
Yeah.
relearning, knowing what the turnover is like at an
Yeah.
agency could be
Yes.
a good question to ask.
It really is.
To figure out if they're going to change their team on you all the time.
Yep. Yeah. We actually just had a sales call where they specifically asked who's going to be on the team. Right. So they want to know who those people are. Well, I'm assuming they're then going to do their own investigation of who are these people and how long have they been there and what do they know?
Right. Right. Exactly. They want to know that the agency is healthy and that people like to work there and that they're going to stick around for a while, because then they're going to stick around on your business for a while.
That's right. Right. And that goes to the knowledge side, right? Like you need to understand the business.
Yeah. I think the biggest problem with hiring an agency is just finding that right one, finding a good one, because there's so many bad ones.
So sad.
Sorry to all of the agencies.
I know.
But there's bad ones.
Some of them aren't good.
It just happens. One of the other things that we hear too from our clients, and some of them, they like to see growth in their company as growth in numbers. So we have 300 employees or we have 3,000 employees. And so they want to build these in-house teams to seem like our company is growing and they want to have those numbers. And that's something that we can't really.
Right. There's nothing you can do about that. Yeah.
You can't do that if you're hiring agency to do it all.
I actually, and again, like, and there's different priorities too, like I had a client call this morning where like, she just really wants to get rid of she just really wants to like, not pay someone for paid search, but like, it's not that she doesn't, but we don't know the reason. So my account manager was like, is she firing us? And I was like, no, she just wants to have it in-house, but they don't know how to do that yet. So she's trying to get to that point. And I don't even know the reason for it, to be honest.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So those things you can't really control.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, an overlooked aspect of choosing the in-house route, people think, oh, it's going to be easier. I'll have that person dedicated, all the reasons that you talked about. But building that team and training them and growing that team is a process in and of itself. And if you're the one doing all the marketing and you realize I need more people helping me, you also have to manage those people. You have to train them. You have to give them reviews. You have to manage their time off and all of those things. So, have you seen any discrepancies between good and bad in-house teams, and what reasons would you put those into each category?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think one thing that stands out to me with that question as we think about like, what is good or what's bad. And to me, what makes a good team is their ability to actually be a team, right? Like there's some in-house teams who like, they have their set of things they're doing, and that's what they care about. And so it can be really difficult, especially if you're hiring an agency, to get that, or sorry, we're talking about in-house, but even if you're hiring an agency, like regardless of what it is, like to get them to work together, right? So like before we're talking about like the marketing, I was saying like my old client, like everyone was integrated. Well, that's not always the case, right? So like if you have an in-house team where everyone's just focused on their own thing and their own goals, it's really hard to get them interacting and having like a cohesive, campaign or teams doing that. The other thing I'd say is, when we think about like a good in-house team, like sometimes there's just not the knowledge. Like I can't tell you, like, we've hired people who said they could do something and they can't. Right. And so now you have to figure out, well, can we use them elsewhere? Like, is it worth keeping? Or do we have to start this process all over again to find that right person? And those things can be tricky. But, I do think like the biggest thing that makes a good team is like everyone's ability to be on the same page and work toward the same goals. And that's just not the case when you get into some of these bigger companies. I have a client right now who like, we just, we're a minor part of their marketing team in that sense. Right. But like all of their in-house like product marketers, they all have different goals. And so you get on these calls and you're listening to them and they're all just, none of them are working together. Like they all like to get a single piece of content approved. I mean, I'm not kidding. It takes 6 months, right? Because they all have their own thoughts and processes on it. And I just don't think that works. It just doesn't work if you're trying to show results.
Definitely. And it's a lot harder in some of these big companies to fire somebody than it is to fire an agency.
Absolutely. That's right. Yeah.
Usually you might have a 30, 60 day out on your agency contract but a person, sometimes a bad person can hang around for years.
That's right. That is right. Yeah. It's tough.
Exactly. Well, one of the more daunting tasks when you're hiring an agency, I think there is a lot more scrutiny that goes into the process, right? There's the RFP, then you might have several pitch meetings, a lot more people are involved than if you're just hiring a paid search person in-house or a designer in-house, something like that. But just like in-house, there's major discrepancies, as we said, between agencies. There's good and bad. So how would you recommend to combat this?
Yeah, I think, so I would say like the majority of our new clients are built through referrals. And it's, clients that, we've had for years that, have recommended us elsewhere. And so if you're looking for an agency, like ask people in your LinkedIn network, right? Ask people in your space. I actually have we have a few like cybersecurity clients. And part of that is because they're all in this particular group for cybersecurity marketers. And like a couple different people had recommended us, right? Like we have a client who's in that group who said, oh, like, we were told marketing, we really like them, right? So then they're coming to us and saying, all right, like I was referred to you. So ask for referrals for sure, like whether it's ahead of time. And then get references, absolutely get references. I mean, of course, just like a job, like we're not going to give you people who are going to like say negative things, but, if you see logos on the site, you could say like, can I talk to so-and-so, or what is that relationship like? But I think the other piece is just, asking them, how do they understand, like, how do they get to know your business? That's something that we see a lot now. Like, how are you going to understand our business? Like, what kind of time frame are we looking at? Of course, there's the like, when can we expect to see results question? And I think that's tricky because you need to understand your goals first, and they need to understand your goals first. So I think questions where you're asking like, how will you help us, identify our goals or understand our goals? You just have to be more specific. You mentioned earlier, like this isn't new anymore. And that is so important because more and more companies, like they have an understanding of search and what it is. And I think you need to ask those right questions. Are your programs templated? right? Like that can't be the case anymore. And that's still, you mentioned bad agencies, and there are still a lot of bad agencies who just have these very templated programs. Like if you're not getting a custom program for your business, it's not right for you. So ask those agencies, like, how are you going to, build a program that's right for my business and my goals? So it just comes down to asking those questions.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes we talk about how many clients each of our people have.
Yes.
Because
Yep.
when someone comes off of one of these agencies I call them agencies lightly, but they have 80 or 100 clients that they're spending an hour a month on.
Yes.
And then they come to us and we have far, far fewer. But it's a big point. And sometimes people don't realize that they're going into a relationship where they have someone's working on even 25 or 40 clients. So that's a lot of people that you have to please every month. So it's good knowing if you have a day of your week dedicated, if you have a couple hours a week, how are they going to be working with them?
Yeah, that's such a great point. I remember we hired a girl, and she still works for us. She's fantastic, but she had come from an agency where she had like 40 clients. And I was like, that's not even a thing. Like, how do you do that? Like,
what if you wanted to take a week off? Do you just not serve half of them for the month?
Right. Sorry, you guys don't get anything this year.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy, but there's so many companies that do it. So you really
it's
have
working
to
for
search.
someone.
Are there certain types of companies or situations where you would tell them they absolutely should go one way or the other, in-house or agency?
Yes. Yeah. And we've had that conversation. We've had clients come to us and say, like, we're looking for an agency, but again, like maybe their budget is too small. Right. And, because like you don't want to use all of your marketing budget to pay for an agency who, maybe you're only going to get 10 hours of work a month. Right. And you're just not going to get the results you need. Where again, as we talked about, like, could you use that same budget to hire someone, even if they're an entry level person who can get familiar with your business and learn those things? So that happens quite, more than you would think, in the sense where it's like, hey, this just isn't going to be right for you. Like, I really think that you should work in-house. Where there's other instances where like their goals are so aggressive that it's like, all right, like you definitely should hire an agency because you aren't going to be able to do all these things. Right. Even if it's like us just like consulting it with all the different teams to give them direction, right? Mm-hmm. That's going to be more helpful than everyone trying to, do their own thing. So there's always instances like that. But I think a lot of times, at least for me, it comes down to time and budget and resources. If someone comes in and they just don't have the resources on their team, then yeah, absolutely, like hire an agency.
Yeah. And we've offered in the past to some of those clients with smaller budgets where they can't necessarily afford an agency, and maybe the agency they can afford is not going to give them what they need for their goals. But we've offered to help them find the right person,
right?
Especially if they're not in our market. If they want us to look at resumes, or they want us to talk to people, or find out if that person really knows what they're talking about. So
yeah, that's awesome. And that's such a great point too. Like, that's one thing I do love about our space is that, there's always yeah, people are competitors, but also like a lot of people just don't have time to take more clients. So like we have a whole list of like agencies and freelancers that like we refer people to, because it's like, this might not be the fit for us, but here are some people that we know. Right. So that's such a good point, is, even if it's not the right avenue, like here's what might be.
Right. I've had people come to me that know I work for a digital agency, and they'll say, "Oh, I'm opening a restaurant. Can you do my website?" And I have to politely say, you can't afford an agency to do your website if you're just opening like a pizza shop on the corner, or whatever the case may be. But I can recommend people the same. We have that list, and it's good to refer people local business, and for those people that want to work with smaller companies and local companies that can do that.
That's such a great point. Yeah, it really is.
So you talked about it a little bit about your background working in an in-house team, how it affects how you view your clients. Do you think the second time you came to co-marketing, do you treat your client relationships different, or do you have any different processes that you use now that you have that knowledge from in-house?
That was certainly the case, in the sense of you just have like more empathy and understanding for like, when you're on the agent side and you've never worked in house, like it doesn't make sense to you, like why things aren't getting done. Like, I mentioned earlier, like I have a client where it takes 6 months to get like a small content change approved. Well, you don't necessarily know that there's 3 product marketing teams that have to approve it. Then it has to go to legal. Then it has to go to like the corporate team, right? Like you don't always know that. And so once you have that experience of understanding like the different ways that companies work, I think you have much more empathy for that. And just experience, it's hard to say like, I came back to the agency side. I was probably like 6 years into my career, right? Whereas, now I'm another 10 years past that. And so it's hard to say like, do I view clients differently because of experience or in-house? But I do know immediately. And I've said to a number of people, like, if you get a chance, like go work on the other side, right? Because it does change your perspective, especially even if you're in-house, it changes your perspective of like what that agency should be providing for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what your expectations are. But I do think there's certainly more empathy there, and how we ask things. I mean, every client's different. So you might just understand like this client, like I know that the way I have to deliver them something has to be different than the way I deliver this other client, because my contact has to send it to the dev team or they have to send it to their content team. And, there's just different ways. And I think that's important to understand, but I definitely didn't have that before.
You just think it's the one person you're working with.
Exactly.
That's where
like,
it
why
ends.
can't they do this? Like,
why don't they read their email and respond to me?
right, how hard is it to make this change? Like,
exactly. So just switching gears a little bit before we close up, what are some of the exciting things that you're working on now, and what's exciting you about the future?
Yeah, I mean, this is just personally, like one thing I have right now is like, I have this client who's trying to get bought in the next 18 months. And that's really cool to me, because I think a challenge that we have as search marketers specifically is like trying to figure out how to scale while also keeping like our campaigns and our content and everything like high quality. Right. Like one thing I've always really prided myself and our agency on is our ability to create things that are actually valuable. And so it's like, well, how do we do this when this client, like we have to ramp up super quick? And so that's been really fun. I mean, it's definitely been a challenge. And, just thinking about, the future, and what I enjoy so much about search is that things change, right? Like we were talking about that earlier, and like, you're always on your toes because you don't know what's going to happen. In the sense, like, look, like marketing's marketing, like there's always things that still apply, but I don't know. I just really love that idea that like you have to be forward thinking and you have to be thinking about what's next. And so that's really fun to me. It's like, all right, how do we do this like quickly and fast?
Yeah. And it's a different goal when someone's selling
Completely
something
different
than if they're just, I want to grow this business and I want to be a
Yeah.
billionaire someday owning the same business.
Yeah.
Than if they're growing it to sell.
Because it really is that whole like perception is reality. So like they have to be seen as this like really big brand that's out there. And obviously there has to be revenue to support that, but like it's a different challenge than just, like let's drive some revenue here.
Right. Right. So I guess one last question. What would you tell someone who is new in marketing or advertising and is just starting out?
Yeah, I think there's two sides to this. And one of these things, like I haven't changed my opinion on, like one of them is that like in marketing, so much of what we do is based on experience, right? And if you're new to marketing and you don't have experience, like whether you're at an agency or you're in-house, like you just might not get to do other things, right? Like I was mentioning earlier, like when I went in-house, I got experience doing things I hadn't in the agency. But like what I always tell people is like, test on your own, experiment on your own, like build yourself a website, right? Because so much like just understanding like how the web works, like it doesn't seem like it should, like it seems like it should be easy, but like it's not. And it's such an important piece of what we do. So like build yourself a website and start like playing around with it to see like, can I optimize this? What are the changes I make and how does it impact things? How do I put analytics on there to learn about like how analytics works or how Google Tag Manager works? Spend a few dollars like trying to promote it on social, right? Even if it's like $50, just see like, how do these platforms work? So I tell people that all the time, like, get to know the platforms and get to know, like, just build your own website and play around with it. And then the second piece is just get to know everything you can about the audience you're targeting, right? Because I think that, that's such a big change for me, at least over the past, like, probably like 5 to 7 years, is like, it's no longer just about, and specifically in the search space, right? It's not just about like reaching somebody, it's reaching that right person, right? People care so much more now about, like, I want to put my money to get the right audience. Well, you need to understand what they actually want if you're going to target them. So I think there's those two pieces: there's experiment, and then just spend as much time as you can getting to know the people that you're going to be targeting. So simple, easy as that,
Just really quick, easy advice.
That's right.
That's really great advice, because I know now the job market is a little bit different, where everyone's hiring and
It's
there's
so
not as
hard.
many candidates, and it's really hard to find qualified people. But when I graduated college, a lot of my friends that went to school for marketing didn't get marketing jobs. They got recruiting jobs, they got sales jobs, they got jobs in insurance. And then they stayed in those jobs. And every once in a while they say things like, oh, I wish I could get back into marketing. But now they have no usable skills in marketing. You know what I mean? So that's really good advice, to do those things on the side. If you get one of those jobs right out of college that is not necessarily what you want to be doing, keep doing things that aren't just on your task list at your job.
Absolutely.
Build your own website, take those HubSpot courses, whatever that is.
Yeah.
So that's really great advice. Thank you.
Oh, good.
Thank you. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add about the in-house versus agency topic, or anything else?
I mean, it's really, like I said, I do think there's a benefit, like, if you've been on one side, to try the other, just because like I said, you just have such a deeper understanding of, like, how to relate to that other side. And I think that helps your goals overall. So, a lot of times someone might feel like, I'm kind of tired of I'm tired of being at, doing what I'm doing. But, and I know that for people who work in agencies, like, burnout is a big thing. Like, go work in house. Like, a lot of times that is much slower. Right? So, but you might find, like, it's not that I dislike the marketing side. It's just that I was burnt out from that element. So don't be afraid to, like, test those different things. And again, I think it's really valuable to your career.
That's great advice. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Agency Scoop. Can you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Yes. So I am on Twitter at Casie G. You can find me on comarketing.com. And I always say LinkedIn, but I just don't ever check my LinkedIn. But sure, I'm there too.
Everyone in business is either business Twitter or LinkedIn. And I'm not good at Twitter. I'm more of a LinkedIn person. But I think more of LinkedIn is fake than Twitter. So I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
I don't know.
So we'll look for you.
Well, thank you so much. This was lovely. So I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, this was a ton of fun. Thanks, Casie. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Agency Scoop. If you liked what you heard, you can subscribe so you don't miss a show. You can also find us on the Cypress North YouTube channel, or follow the Agency Scoop on Twitter and LinkedIn. I'd love to hear your ideas for future topics. See you next time on the Agency Scoop.